6 a.m. The sun's barely up. I'm out in my vineyard, boots soaked with dew, checking the vines my family's worked since 1987. Then I hear tires on gravel. 3 people in bright yellow security vests, fake badges gleaming, march straight into my rows like they own the place. They're measuring my trellises, taking photos, trampling my grapes. The leader, blonde bob, clipboard, nails so perfect they could slice bread, stops right in front of me. "Sir, your property is negatively impacting community aesthetics. That's a $500 daily fine until compliance." I almost spit my coffee. "Community? Lady, I'm not in your HOA, never have been." She smirks, hands me an official-looking citation. "Vintner's Ridge HOA now has jurisdiction over all adjacent properties. You have 72 hours. I smiled, pulled out my phone, and called the one person who actually wears a real badge. 10 minutes later, the sheriff's cruiser rolls in. Lights off, but presence loud. Keep watching to see these fake cops learn the hard way whose land this really is. Drop your state below if you've ever had an HOA Karen step foot on your property. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. I'm Marcus Brennan, 52 years old, third-generation owner of this 12-acre slice of heaven in Sonoma County. My grandfather planted these vines back when Reagan was governor, and my family's been making wine here ever since. Nothing fancy, just honest grapes, honest work, and a tasting room where the oak barrels smell like vanilla and the tourists smell like money. The property's got soul. Hand-built stone walls my grandfather laid himself, rough granite that'll tear your knuckles if you're not careful. A rustic farmhouse that creaks like an old ship, an organic certification I earned through 15 years of babying this soil like it was my firstborn. Every morning, mist rolls through these vine rows thick as cigarette smoke, and come harvest time, the sweet fermentation smell hits you so hard it's like getting punched by a fruit basket. I was comfortable, not rich, but comfortable. Then I dropped 30 grand on a new irrigation system last spring, which stretched my budget thinner than my patience for city folks complaining about farm smells. 5 years ago, some developer built Vintner's Ridge Estate next door. 200 McMansions starting at $850,000, marketed as authentic wine country living. The irony was thicker than morning fog. These people wanted vineyard views without vineyard realities. Dust clouds during harvest, tractor engines coughing to life at dawn, seasonal workers beat up trucks lined up like a used car lot during picking season. Enter Delilah Worthington. Picture a corporate compliance officer who got drunk on HOA power and never sobered up. 48, blonde bob sharp enough to cut glass, manicured nails that clicked against her clipboard like tiny hammers. Always wore designer athleisure, the kind that costs more than most people's car payments, and drove a white BMW X5 so pristine it looked like it got detailed twice a week. Her enforcement squad was straight out of a bad comedy. Stuart Pembroke, retired insurance adjuster who found violations the way bloodhounds find bacon. Janet Clearwater, former teacher who treated HOA rules like the 10 Commandments. And Bobby Hutchins, poor Bobby, ex-mall security guard finally living his dream of wearing a badge again, even if he had to iron it onto a vest himself. When Sheriff Morrison's cruiser came crunching up my gravel driveway, I knew this was about to get interesting. Morrison's good people. The kind of cop who listens first, talks second, and only draws conclusions after he's heard both sides lie to his face. "Morning, folks. Someone called about a property dispute?" Delilah launched into her act, waving laminated certificates that looked like they came from the University of Google. "Officer, we represent Agricultural Compliance Authority, investigating serious violations of community standards." Morrison examined her paperwork like a jeweler studying a cubic zirconia. "Ma'am, what government agency issued these credentials?" "We're authorized by the Homeowners Association." "That's not what I asked." Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone who dealt with wannabe cops before. Bobby's yellow security vest was practically glowing in the morning sun, the kind you order online for $19.99 plus shipping. Morrison noticed. "Sir," he said to me, "you having problems with these folks?" "They claim I'm in their HOA. News to me, considering my family's been here since dirt was new." Morrison turned back to Delilah, and I swear the temperature dropped 5 degrees. "Ma'am, I see fake badges, made-up authority, and trespassing on private property. That's 3 strikes in my book. Delilah's smile could have cut diamonds. Of course, officer. Simple misunderstanding. We'll pursue this through proper legal channels. After the cruiser disappeared, I figured that was game over. But Delilah's parting shot should have been my wake-up call. Don't get too comfortable, Mr. Brennan. We know how to work within the system. The way she said system made it sound like a threat. Turns out Delilah didn't just know how to work within the system. She knew how to turn it into a weapon of mass bureaucracy. 2 days after the sheriff's visit, I'm out checking irrigation lines when my phone starts buzzing like an angry hornet's nest. County Code Enforcement. Mr. Brennan, we've received serious complaints about zoning violations. Before I could explain that I'd been legally farming here since before these bureaucrats discovered organic food, the phone rang again. State Labor Board, then EPA, then Fire Department. By noon, 12 different agencies wanted my head on a platter, all demanding documentation, photos, and site visits. What made this suspicious wasn't just the volume, it was the identical language. Every complaint used the exact same corporate buzzwords: potential environmental impact, inappropriate land use for residential area, safety concerns for nearby families. Someone had clearly been busy with a thesaurus and a serious grudge. The inspection parade started Monday morning. County Inspector Rodriguez showed up looking like he'd rather be getting a root canal. Mr. Brennan, gotta level with you. This is the weirdest complaint I've ever seen. Whoever filed it claims you're violating residential zoning codes. And? You're zoned agricultural, have been since Carter was president. I remembered reading about this exact situation in a Farm Bureau newsletter last year. Developers trying to use bureaucratic harassment to force out established farms. The article had mentioned something about California's Right to Farm Act, protecting operations like mine from exactly this kind of nonsense. Apparently, if you were farming first, you get legal priority over neighbors who move next door and then complain about farm sounds and smells. Good to know I had some legal backup. Tuesday brought the fire marshal, expecting to find violations threatening those precious McMansions. Instead, he found equipment storage that exceeded state safety standards. Your setup's cleaner than half the commercial operations I inspect, he said, pocketing a business card from my tasting room. You give tours? By Thursday, I'd lost 3 full workdays hosting government officials who kept reaching the same conclusion. Absolutely nothing wrong. Every agency filed clean reports. The EPA inspector practically wrote love letters about my organic certification. But here's where things got interesting. Rodriguez pulled me aside during his final visit, checking over his shoulder like he was about to leak state secrets. Marcus, someone's gunning for you hard. 15 years doing this job. Never seen complaints this perfectly coordinated. Same formatting, same legal buzzwords, hell, even the same typos. Typos? Whoever wrote these keeps spelling aesthetic as aesthetic, every single complaint. He handed me copies, and there it was, a paper trail leading straight back to the same ZIP code as Vintner's Ridge Estate. But the real kicker? These weren't even original complaints. Someone had downloaded template forms from the county website and filled them out Mad Lib style, swapping in my property details like they were ordering takeout. That evening, I started building my own paper trail. Time-stamped photos of every interaction, audio recordings when legal, copies of every official response. If Delilah wanted bureaucratic warfare, I'd make sure I had better ammunition than her spell-check challenged complaint templates. The psychological pressure campaign kicked into high gear. Every morning at 7 sharp, that pristine white BMW would cruise past my driveway, slow enough for me to notice, not slow enough to call it stalking. The engine purred like a well-fed cat, which somehow made it more irritating than if she'd been driving a diesel truck. Delilah launched her social media blitzkrieg on the Vintner's Ridge Facebook group, posting about agricultural nuisances threatening our property values. The response was so coordinated it looked like a bot farm. Stuart, Janet, and 2 neighbors I'd never met would comment within minutes, using language so identical they might as well have been copying from the same script. Completely unacceptable for a residential community. Property values at serious risk. Someone needs to contact the authorities. The authorities had already been contacted, thanks very much, and they'd found absolutely nothing. Time to lawyer up. Sarah Jules came recommended by the Farm Bureau. sharp as pruning shears and specialized in property rights. Her office smelled like old law books and fresh determination. "Textbook harassment," Jules said, reviewing my documentation. "The pattern's obvious, but proving coordination requires more evidence. Keep documenting everything." "How much more do you need?" 12 frivolous complaints in 1 week. "Enough to convince a judge this isn't concerned citizens exercising rights. We need malicious intent and coordination proof." Meanwhile, the smell of diesel exhaust from inspection vehicles became my new daily cologne. I'd hosted more government officials than a campaign fundraiser, and every single one left scratching their head about why they'd been called. Rodriguez's parting words echoed in my head. "Watch your six, Marcus. Whoever's orchestrating this circus isn't finished with the show." The evening mist was rolling in thick as cotton when I realized Delilah had just declared war. Too bad for her. Farmers know something about long campaigns. If bureaucratic warfare was round 1, Delilah's round 2 aimed straight for my wallet, and she wasn't playing around. 3 weeks after the inspection parade ended, my weekend tasting room sales nosedived harder than a tourist after too many wine samples. From averaging $800 on a good Saturday to barely scraping together $300. At first, I blamed the weather. Then I started finding the flyers. Someone was slapping professionally printed cards under windshield wipers in my parking area, the paper stock so glossy it practically blinded you. Concerned about noise and environmental violations? Learn the truth about Brennan Vineyard's impact on our community. Complete with a QR code linking to a website that made my operation sound like Chernobyl with grapevines. The review bombing hit like a coordinated airstrike. 15 one-star reviews appeared within 48 hours, all singing the same tune about excessive noise, unprofessional operations, and environmental disasters. The language was so identical they could have been written by the same person, which, let's be honest, they probably were. But Stuart Pembroke made the kind of mistake that would make a defense attorney weep with joy. Unlike the anonymous reviews, he used his real name and got specific enough to hang himself. Visited last weekend and was disturbed by 6:15 a.m. tractor noise on Tuesday morning, completely inappropriate for a residential area. I screenshot that beauty faster than a paparazzi at a celebrity meltdown. Stewart had just confessed to surveillance. Nobody knows my Tuesday morning tractor schedule unless they're watching my property like it's must-see TV. And 6:15 a.m.? That's the kind of precision that comes from sitting in a parked car with a stopwatch. The restaurant pressure campaign followed the same script. Jim from Rosemary's Bistro called sounding like someone was holding his dog hostage. "Marcus, we've been getting customer complaints about environmental problems at your vineyard." "Jim, you've bought my wine for 3 years. When exactly did I become an environmental hazard?" "I know this is bullshit, but we can't afford to lose customers. People are threatening boycotts." The Copper Kettle canceled that same week. Same story, same manufactured outrage from concerned customers who probably couldn't find my vineyard with GPS and a tour guide. That's when Bobby Hutchins made his dramatic entrance at Murphy's Diner. I was drowning my sorrows in coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through old socks when Bobby slumped onto the stool next to me. His wrinkled security vest made him look like a discount superhero having an identity crisis. "Marcus, we gotta talk. If this is about my improper diner posture, I'm not in the mood for citations." Bobby glanced around like he expected CIA agents to rappel through the windows. "This thing with Delilah, it's gone completely sideways." He pulled out his phone with hands shakier than a chihuahua in a thunderstorm and showed me text messages that made my blood pressure spike into stroke territory. Payment confirmations for $500 per enforcement visit. Detailed instructions on what violations to document. And the smoking gun, a message from Delilah saying, "Be creative with your interpretations. Find something actionable." Why show me this? Because I saw those security cameras going up, and I'm not doing 25 to life for Queen Karen's property value crusade. Bobby spilled everything. Delilah was planning federal involvement, claiming my operation threatened public safety. She'd contacted the EPA about groundwater contamination, and was researching OSHA violations for seasonal worker conditions. That weekend, I installed a security system that would make the Pentagon jealous. 6 motion-activated cameras with infrared capability, cloud storage, and enough resolution to count nose hairs from 50 yards. If Delilah wanted surveillance games, I'd show her how professionals play. The cameras delivered gold within a week. Daily footage of Delilah's reconnaissance missions. That spotless BMW crawling past at exactly 7 a.m., stopping long enough for photo sessions, then speeding off like she was fleeing a crime scene. Better yet, I caught Janet Clearwater trespassing after dark, photographing my equipment storage from inside my property line. Frank Rodriguez dropped by during harvest prep, reeking of motor oil and carrying neighborhood intelligence that explained everything. Marcus, you know that development's bleeding money like a gut-shot deer, right? How bad? 3 builders suing each other over foundation problems. Half the houses are sinking, and property values are in free fall. Delilah owes more on her mortgage than her house is worth by 50 grand, easy. Suddenly, her desperation campaign made perfect sense. My vineyard's continued success highlighted their development's failures. If she could force me out or tank my reputation, maybe she could salvage her investment before the bank came calling. Sarah Jules reviewed my evidence pile with the enthusiasm of a prosecutor finding DNA on a murder weapon. This coordinated review campaign creates immediate legal liability, she explained. When multiple people conspire to post false statements damaging business reputation, each participant becomes liable for defamation per se. Translation: I didn't need to prove specific damages. The fake reviews were proof enough. The sweet smell of grape fermentation filled the evening air as I walked my newly secured perimeter. Delilah had made this war personal, forgetting one crucial fact about farmers. We've been dealing with pests since agriculture was invented. August in wine country is make or break time. 1 week of inadequate watering during the pre-harvest heat wave, and you can kiss $80,000 worth of grapes goodbye. Delilah knew this, which is why she chose that exact moment to escalate from petty harassment to full-blown agricultural warfare. I discovered her handiwork at 6:30 a.m. on a Tuesday that started at 102 degrees and promised to get nastier. Walking out to check the irrigation system, I heard the sound that makes every farmer's blood run cold, the hiss of water escaping where it shouldn't be escaping. Someone had taken bolt cutters to my main irrigation line during the night. Clean cuts through half-inch PVC, placed for maximum damage. Water was gushing into the dirt, instead of reaching vines that were already stressed from the heat wave. In these conditions, my entire crop would be crispy critters within 48 hours. But here's where Delilah's amateur hour criminal career hit a wall. My new security system had captured everything in infrared glory that was clearer than my morning coffee. The footage read like a how-to manual for getting arrested. Figure in distinctive white jacket approaching the line at 2:47 a.m. Bolt cutters glinting like surgical instruments. Methodical destruction of irrigation infrastructure. And parked exactly 200 yards away on the public road. Positioned like a getaway vehicle in a heist movie. One spotless white BMW X5. License plate visible enough to read the owner's manual. I called my emergency plumber first, then Jules. Then started the most expensive morning of my farming career. Diesel pumps growling like mechanical dragons, 500-gallon tanks that cost more per day than most people's rent, and a crew working around the clock to hand water 20 acres of thirsty vines. $3,000 to save an $80,000 harvest, the kind of math that makes your wallet weep. The smell of diesel exhaust mixed with panic sweat as I coordinated the emergency response, but the community rallied like we were fighting a wildfire. Frank Rodriguez arrived with his spare pump before I finished explaining the situation. Maria Santos brought portable tanks that smelled like they'd been storing wine instead of water. By noon, half the valley's vintners had contributed equipment or volunteer labor. When someone messes with one farmer, they mess with all of us, Frank said, connecting hoses with the efficiency of a pit crew. Apparently, agricultural solidarity runs deeper than property lines. My plumber, Dave Kim, photographed the damage with forensic precision. Whoever did this studied your system, he said, pointing to the strategic placement of each cut. This wasn't random vandalism. This was surgical sabotage designed for maximum impact. While we scrambled to save the harvest, my cameras kept rolling, and they captured something beautiful. Delilah making 3 separate drive-bys to admire her destruction. Each pass slower than the last, like she was touring a crime scene she'd personally choreographed. The third pass, She actually stopped and took photos with her phone. Evidence of evidence gathering. Bobby's panicked phone call came that afternoon, his voice shakier than a paint mixer in an earthquake. "Marcus, she's lost it completely. Delilah's talking about getting federal agencies involved. EPA, OSHA, anyone who can shut you down permanently." "Federal? Over what?" "She doesn't care. Says she'll manufacture violations if she has to. Quote, I don't care what it takes. Find something that will destroy him permanently." Bobby met us at Jules's office the next morning, carrying a phone full of evidence that could have convicted Al Capone. Text messages detailing payment schedules, voice recordings of specific instructions for fabricating violations, and the crown jewel, crystal clear audio of Delilah saying, "Create whatever documentation you need. I want him financially ruined." Chen reviewed the recordings with the expression of a prosecutor who just won the lottery. "This elevates everything from civil harassment to criminal conspiracy," she explained. "Combined with video evidence of property destruction, we're looking at felony charges." Sheriff Morrison took the criminal complaint personally. Turns out he'd grown up on a farm and understood that attacking someone's irrigation during harvest season was like poisoning a water well. Property destruction, criminal harassment, conspiracy to defraud government agencies, he said, ticking off charges like items on a grocery list. She picked the wrong victim and documented every crime. But Delilah's panic response was pure gold. When she learned about the criminal complaint, she posted a desperate character assassination attempt on Facebook, claiming Bobby was an unreliable alcoholic seeking revenge over unpaid fees. Bobby's counterattack was swift and devastating. He uploaded every payment confirmation, every instruction message, every piece of coordination evidence. The post went viral in the local community within hours. Board member Patricia Williams commented publicly, "I never authorize payments to enforcement officers. Where exactly did this money come from?" The emergency HOA audit that followed revealed $8,000 in mysterious community improvement expenses, all connected to harassing non-members. Delilah had been treating association funds like her personal war chest. Local reporter Jamie Walsh ran a front-page story with security camera stills that looked like a crime documentary. Letters to the editor poured in supporting agricultural protection, many from people dealing with similar HOA harassment. Standing in my vineyard that evening, watching emergency pumps push life-giving water through temporary lines, I realized Delilah had made a critical miscalculation. She'd escalated from annoying neighbor to criminal defendant, and there's no going back from that ledge. Sometimes, the universe drops a hydrogen bomb right into your filing cabinet. I was knee-deep in paperwork for Jules's criminal case, organizing documents like I was preparing for tax season in hell, when I found a manila folder that hadn't seen daylight since Clinton was president. Inside was my grandfather's original 1987 property deed, yellow with age and written in the kind of legal language that makes normal people's eyes bleed. But buried in paragraph 7, subsection C, was a sentence that made me read it 3 times before the implications hit me like a runaway tractor. Agricultural easement protecting farming operations in perpetuity, with adjacent properties subordinate to established agricultural use. Holy shit! I hadn't just inherited land and vines. I'd inherited a legal nuclear weapon. Chen's office the next morning smelled like fresh coffee and impending victory. When I slapped that deed on her desk, her expression shifted from professional interest to predatory glee in about 2 seconds. "Marcus, this isn't just game over. This is Delilah stepping on a landmine she planted herself. Break it down for me. This easement doesn't just protect your farming. It legally requires any residential development to shut up and deal with normal agricultural activities. Noise, dust, equipment, seasonal workers, everything." Chen pulled up the HOA's governing documents, faster than a card shark dealing blackjack. There it was in subsection 12, clear as mountain air. Formal acknowledgement of the agricultural easement affecting all adjacent properties. "She knew," Jules said, highlighting the passage with the enthusiasm of a prosecutor finding DNA evidence. "As HOA president, she's legally required to understand these governing documents. Plus, title reports during development would have disclosed this easement to every single buyer." The beautiful irony was suffocating. Delilah hadn't just been harassing me. She'd been willfully violating federally protected agricultural rights, while knowing she had zero legal authority. Every fake citation, every fraudulent complaint, every act of sabotage was done with full knowledge that she was breaking the law. But wait, it gets better. Chen contacted the title insurance company that had handled the development's property coverage, and their lawyer's voice went up 3 octaves when she explained the situation. Apparently, they'd royally screwed up by not clearly explaining the easement's implications to buyers. 200 homeowners bought houses thinking they could control your farming operation, Jules said after hanging up. If the title company failed to disclose that agriculture gets legal priority over residential complaints, they're looking at class action lawsuit territory. The insurance company's panic call came within hours. $75,000 for quiet resolution. Take it or leave it. Please don't make this public. They're hemorrhaging, Jules explained. If this story breaks, every homeowner in that development could sue for fraudulent concealment of material information. But I wasn't interested in hush money. This was bigger than my vineyard. It was about every farmer dealing with suburban Karen syndrome. A secret settlement would leave the next agricultural operation defenseless. Chen's investigation revealed Delilah's greatest hits collection. Dave Kellerman, $3,000 to end livestock violations. Rita Santos, $2,500 for commercial vehicle violations. Total extortion haul, $15,000 from non-HOA members over 2 years. She's not running an HOA, Jules said, arranging evidence like a war room general. She's running a protection racket. Delilah's financial desperation painted the complete picture. Underwater mortgage, maxed credit cards, and, this was rich, $35,000 lost in a pyramid scheme wine distribution company. She'd been trying to destroy my legitimate wine business while her fake one collapsed. The title company kept calling with increasingly desperate settlement offers, but Jules advised patience. Their exposure is catastrophic. We're not just talking about your case, we're talking about potential fraud claims from 200 families. Last year, I'd read about a similar case in Napa where agricultural easements had completely nullified HOA authority. The farm had won protection from all complaints and recovered significant damages for business interference. When agriculture has legal priority, it really has priority. Noise ordinances, aesthetic rules, even zoning restrictions become suggestions. Greetings on my porch that evening, watching sunset light turn my rescued vines into gold. I realized Delilah had made the classic villain mistake. She'd brought a knife to a nuclear war. With a legal nuclear weapon in my back pocket, it was time to assemble an army. Turns out I wasn't the only farmer who'd been paying tribute to Queen Delilah's protection racket. Dave Kellerman answered his phone like he'd been waiting for this call since the Carter administration. Marcus, please tell me you're calling about that psychotic HOA dictator. Lucky guess? Rita Santos called an hour ago saying some hotshot attorney wanted to talk to all 3 of us about Delilah. About damn time someone fought back instead of just paying her extortion fees. We met at Jules's office the next morning. Me, Dave, and Rita, looking like survivors of the same natural disaster. The air conditioner wheezed like an asthmatic chain smoker, but nobody cared because we were finally comparing war stories with people who'd lived through the same nightmare. Dave's story was a carbon copy of mine, with different livestock. Delilah's fake enforcement circus had rolled up to his 5-acre horse rescue, claiming 3 elderly horses violated residential zoning standards. Same yellow vests, same laminated badges, same escalating threats until he paid $3,000 in compliance fees to make them vanish. Rita's landscaping business had gotten the identical treatment. Delilah targeted the work trailer parked on Rita's own property, manufacturing commercial vehicle violations that somehow required $2,500 to resolve. Same playbook, same settlement pressure, same relief when the harassment stopped after payment. It's like she studied a manual for small-time organized crime, Jules said, spreading our documentation across her conference table with the precision of a general planning D-Day. Fake authority, escalating pressure, settlement amounts calculated to be cheaper than fighting. But here's what made our coalition beautiful: shared legal firepower and tripled evidence. Jules represented all 3 of us under one coordinated strategy, splitting her $25,000 fee 3 ways while multiplying our collective leverage. Our combined documentation transformed individual harassment cases into a RICO-worthy criminal conspiracy. The evidence mountain we'd assembled could have buried a small courthouse. 47 video incidents across 3 properties, 23 audio recordings of threats and fabricated violations, 35,000 in documented financial damages, plus government agency responses confirming 0 actual violations anywhere. Chen contacted local investigative reporter Jamie Walsh, who'd been tracking HOA abuse cases throughout Northern California like a bloodhound following corruption trails. Walsh's preliminary research revealed that Delilah's tactics were spreading. Similar harassment campaigns were targeting rural operations across 3 counties. This isn't about property disputes, Walsh explained during our strategy meeting. This is about whether suburban homeowner associations can terrorize rural operations into submission through bureaucratic warfare. Your case could establish precedent protecting agriculture statewide. Community support emerged faster than weeds after rain. Farm Bureau President Garcia offered organizational backing and statewide media contacts. The Vintners Association collected 30 signatures supporting agricultural protection rights. County Supervisor Williams privately encouraged our legal challenge, calling it exactly the precedent rural communities need. Chen educated us about the legal framework we'd accidentally stumbled into, like farmers finding oil while digging wells. California's Right to Farm Act was designed for exactly our situation, protecting established agricultural operations from complaints by people who moved next door and then decided farming was inconvenient. The principle was elegantly simple. First in time, first in right, meaning agriculture gets legal priority over residential comfort. Your grandfather's easement amplifies this protection exponentially, Jules explained, pointing to highlighted sections of agricultural law. Most right-to-farm cases require proving agricultural precedents through historical evidence. Your easement explicitly establishes that precedents in recorded documents every buyer had to acknowledge. The financial analysis was encouraging enough to make an accountant smile. Legal costs for complete resolution, $25,000 split 3 ways, roughly $8,000 each. Potential recovery from damages, extorted payments, and punitive awards, over $100,000 combined. Beyond money, public victory would deter future harassment campaigns against every rural property owner in the region. The title insurance company's panic created additional leverage. Their failure to properly disclose agricultural restrictions to 200 homeowners meant massive class action liability exposure. Company lawyers called Jules daily with increasingly desperate settlement offers, terrified of publicity that could trigger lawsuits from every homeowner who'd been misled about agricultural rights. They're more afraid of headlines than damages, Jules said after declining another settlement. Once this story breaks, every buyer in that development will realize they were sold false bills of goods about controlling agricultural operations. We formalized an agricultural protection coalition with 47 founding members, creating early warning systems for harassment campaigns, shared legal resources, and political influence supporting farm-friendly policies. The group would function like a rural neighborhood watch, except instead of reporting suspicious activity, we'd be reporting suspicious HOA presidents. Chen's office walls looked like a crime investigation unit. Timeline charts, evidence photographs, legal precedent research covering every surface. Her coffee still tasted like someone had filtered it through compost, but nobody complained because our legal strategy was brewing to perfection. The practical preparation was thorough as harvest planning. Enhanced security protocols, communication systems routing all HOA contact through legal channels, and financial protections ensuring damage awards stayed safe from retaliation attempts. Delilah picked the wrong farmers, Dave said during our final coordination meeting. She thought rural folks would roll over like scared dogs. Rita's smile was sharper than pruning shears. She forgot that farmers fight droughts, floods, diseases, and government bureaucracy for breakfast. One delusional HOA president isn't exactly an extinction-level threat. Desperation makes people stupid, and Delilah was about to earn a PhD in catastrophically poor decision-making. When she learned about our criminal complaint and agricultural coalition, she made the kind of choice that gives defense attorneys stress ulcers. She decided to buy herself a government official. County Inspector Rodriguez called me Tuesday morning, his voice carrying the particular disgust reserved for people who've just been personally insulted by rank amateurs. "Marcus, you're not going to believe what just happened." Delilah Worthington walked into my office and offered me $2,000 cash to find violations on your property. She actually tried to bribe you? Pulled out an envelope stuffed with hundreds, right there on my desk. Said, maybe I hadn't looked hard enough the first time, and financial incentive might help me be more thorough. Rodriguez's laugh was drier than August dust. Lady must think I got this job from a cereal box. Rodriguez had done what any honest public servant would do, reported the attempted bribery to Sheriff Morrison and county ethics within the hour. Better yet, when Delilah insisted on a follow-up meeting to clarify the arrangement, he'd agreed to wear a wire. The recording Jules played for me the next day was so incriminating, it practically prosecuted itself. Delilah's voice, clear as church bells. I don't care what regulations you have to interpret creatively. Environmental violations, safety issues, zoning problems, find something actionable. There's another 1,000 if you can shut them down permanently. Ma'am, I can't manufacture violations that don't exist. I'm not asking you to manufacture anything. I'm asking you to be more flexible in your professional judgment. The woman had just attempted to corrupt a government official while being recorded by law enforcement. Stephen Hawking couldn't have calculated the mathematical impossibility of making a worse decision. But wait, there's more. While Rodriguez was documenting her corruption attempts, Delilah launched a scorched earth environmental smear campaign. Called state representatives claiming my organic vineyard was poisoning residential water supplies, contacted EPA about fictional groundwater contamination, even dragged OSHA into her fantasy, alleging dangerous worker conditions. The state environmental inspector who arrived looked like someone had forced him to investigate claims that gravity was optional. Mr. Brennan, I have to follow up on these allegations, but whoever filed this complaint couldn't identify pesticide if it bit them. Your organic certification is cleaner than most people's kitchens. Comprehensive soil and water testing confirmed what everyone already knew. My operation was environmentally spotless. The EPA inspector actually requested documentation to use as a model for sustainable agriculture practices. Then came the plot twist that made this whole circus worth the price of admission. The title insurance company's legal department, watching our case gain momentum like a Category 5 hurricane, made a panic-driven intervention. Emergency phone call to Jules, $75,000 immediate settlement, take it or leave it. Please don't obliterate our corporate reputation in open court. I studied Jules across her desk, which looked like the evidence room from a major federal investigation. They're that scared? Terrified beyond rational thought. If this goes public, every homeowner in that development learns they were systematically defrauded about agricultural restrictions. We're talking class action lawsuits that could bankrupt their entire regional operation. The decision was easier than I'd expected. Taking hush money would solve my problems, while abandoning every other rural property owner to the next power-drunk HOA president. This fight was bigger than my vineyard. It was about whether suburban developments could terrorize agricultural operations into submission. Chen's private investigator had been painting Delilah's complete financial portrait, and it was uglier than a drought-stressed vine. $50,000 in credit card debt, 4 months behind on mortgage payments, and the beautiful irony, $35,000 lost in a multi-level marketing wine distribution scheme that had collapsed faster than a house of cards in a tornado. She's been trying to destroy your successful wine business while her fraudulent one imploded, Jules explained. Classic psychological projection of personal failure onto competent competitors. Sheriff Morrison's Wednesday call made my entire week. Marcus, we're arresting Delilah this afternoon. Attempted bribery, criminal harassment, property damage, fraud, conspiracy to corrupt government processes. She's graduated from neighborhood nuisance to federal criminal. The perp walk footage that evening was better than pay-per-view entertainment. Delilah being escorted to the squad car in handcuffs, still wearing her HOA president badge, like it provided sovereign immunity. Every local news station led with, HOA president arrested for corruption and harassment. Bail set at $25,000, apparently maxed out her remaining credit limits. Her court-appointed attorney looked fresh out of law school, and about as experienced with criminal defense as I was with quantum physics. The HOA's emergency board meeting was pure entertainment. Vice President Thompson demanded Delilah's immediate resignation, while members competed to distance themselves from her criminal enterprise. Forensic accounting revealed $23,000 in unexplained expenditures, including payments to fake enforcement officers and contractor kickbacks that would make organized crime blush. Delilah's enforcement army abandoned ship with the speed of roaches when lights come on. Stewart resigned immediately, claiming deception about authority. Janet lawyered up, insisting she'd only documented legitimate concerns. Bobby was already singing to prosecutors like a canary with a recording contract. The crisp evening air carried the sweet smell of successful fermentation as I walked property lines that had become a crime scene in reverse. Evidence of harassment captured by my cameras would soon become evidence of justice in courtrooms. Delilah had forgotten Sun Tzu's basic rule. When you're in a hole, stop digging. Instead, she'd grabbed dynamite and lit the fuse. With Delilah in handcuffs and her corruption exposed, any rational person would have hired a lawyer, kept quiet, and prayed for mercy. But Delilah had left rational in her rearview mirror, somewhere around the irrigation sabotage. Her first brilliant move was posting bail using her 70-year-old mother's retirement fund. Her second masterpiece was ignoring her court-appointed attorney's explicit instructions to shut up, instead running the HOA from jail through increasingly deranged phone calls that the county was legally required to record. The jailhouse recordings Jules obtained through discovery were so self-incriminating they practically prosecuted themselves. Delilah's voice echoing through concrete corridors. Find alternative enforcement methods. Explore federal regulatory options. I don't care what it takes. Shut down that vineyard permanently. She was literally coordinating continued harassment from a county jail cell, apparently convinced that handcuffs were just a fashion accessory and criminal charges were suggestions. But here's where the story gets beautiful. A whistleblower emerged from inside the title insurance company, Maria Gonzalez, a title agent who'd been sitting on explosive documents for 5 years, waiting for someone brave enough to take on corporate fraud. They knew about your agricultural easement from day one, Maria told us during a meeting in Jules's office, which now smelled like coffee and impending corporate apocalypse. I flagged the disclosure requirements, and my supervisor told me to bury the easement information in subsection 47 of the title reports. Subsection 47? Legal gibberish so dense that even attorneys need translators. Buyers would never find agricultural restrictions hidden in that bureaucratic maze. The email evidence Maria provided read like a manual for systematic fraud. Company executives discussing strategies to minimize agricultural easement disclosures to avoid scaring off potential buyers. Deliberate plans to hide farming protections in language so complex that Harvard law graduates would need GPS to navigate it. This isn't negligent disclosure, Jules said, spreading the emails across her desk like cards in a winning poker hand. This is industrial-scale consumer fraud with federal implications. The FBI's white-collar crime unit took interest faster than vultures spotting roadkill. Wire fraud, interstate conspiracy, systematic deception of federal housing programs. The title company had managed to transform a local harassment case into a federal criminal investigation worthy of organized crime prosecutions. Meanwhile, Delilah's HOA kingdom was imploding, with the structural integrity of a sandcastle in a tsunami. The forensic audit revealed financial misconduct that would have impressed medieval tax collectors. $45,000 in vanished expenditures, vendor kickbacks totaling $12,000, invoices for services that existed only in Delilah's imagination. Board member Patricia Williams issued a public statement that read like a corporate confession. We are horrified to discover the extent of financial irregularities and criminal activities conducted under previous leadership. The association is cooperating with all law enforcement agencies and will pursue full restitution of misappropriated funds. 3 separate lawsuits demanded return of dues spent harassing non-members instead of maintaining community amenities. The HOA's insurance company canceled coverage, leaving the association legally naked during maximum liability exposure. But Delilah's final act of self-destruction deserves a place in legal history textbooks under what not to do while under criminal indictment. From her jail cell, she called the Sonoma County Tribune and gave an interview that would have made Johnny Cochran weep. I was protecting property values for hard-working families, she declared, apparently unaware that confessing to conspiracy while wearing orange jumpsuit wasn't brilliant legal strategy. Marcus Brennan's operation was threatening investment security for 200 households. The article ran with photos of cut irrigation lines and fake enforcement officers under the headline, Jailed HOA president defends criminal campaign. Legal experts quoted called her statements prosecutorial Christmas morning, wrapped in defendant stupidity. Chen filed motions, including jailhouse recordings and newspaper confessions, as evidence in our civil case. She's building our case better than we could, Jules laughed, organizing Delilah's self-incriminating statements like a greatest hits album. She's convicted herself and volunteered to pay damages. My vineyard had become ground zero for agricultural rights advocacy. Law professors brought students to study the case. Agricultural groups from Texas to Oregon requested information about forming protection coalitions. The Wine Institute featured our story as their lead article about agricultural easement protections. I remembered reading about RICO statutes during my research, how systematic criminal enterprises could face decades of federal prison time when patterns of illegal activity generated revenue. Delilah's operation had crossed every line, from harassment to racketeering, with documentation that would make prosecutors salivate. Business was exploding beyond imagination. Publicity had transformed my modest tasting room into agricultural tourism destination. Online club membership hit 400 supporters who wanted to back family farming against suburban terrorism. The rich smell of successful fermentation filled autumn air as I walked property lines that had become a monument to agricultural protection. Every grape cluster represented 3 generations of legitimate farming, plus future protection for operations not yet planted. Delilah's foreclosure notice appeared in legal advertisements the following week. Her criminal attorney was begging prosecutors for plea negotiations to avoid federal charges carrying 20-year minimums. She'd violated Sun Tzu's most basic wisdom: when your enemy is destroying themselves, get out of the way. Instead, she'd provided gasoline and matches for her own immolation. Pure performance art in self-destruction. The county board hearing was scheduled for a Thursday evening in November, and by 6 p.m., the main hearing room was packed tighter than grapes in a harvest bin. 200 residents had shown up: farmers, vintners, small business owners, and enough angry homeowners to fill a small stadium. The air buzzed with anticipation thick enough to cut with pruning shears. 3 television stations had cameras rolling. 2 newspapers had reporters with notepads ready. The county's government access channel was broadcasting live to anyone with cable and a sense of justice. This wasn't just a hearing, it was agricultural theater with real consequences. The agenda item read simply, "Agricultural protection and property rights in rural residential interface areas." But everyone in that room knew we were really here to decide whether suburban homeowner associations could terrorize family farmers into submission through bureaucratic warfare. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing a presentation that could have convinced a jury of grapevines to convict themselves. Professional slides showing the harassment timeline, security camera footage edited into a greatest hits collection, financial damage charts that made my losses look like war reparations, and legal analysis explaining why agricultural easements exist in the first place. But the real drama started when I began playing the evidence. The room went dead silent during the sabotage footage. Infrared video of someone cutting irrigation lines while a BMW waited in the shadows. Audible gasps echoed off the marble walls when I showed fake enforcement officers trespassing on private property, measuring equipment like they were collecting evidence for an international tribunal. This harassment campaign has cost my family $35,000 in damages, legal fees, and emergency equipment, I told the packed room. But the real cost is to every rural property owner who might face similar attacks from people who think suburban comfort trumps agricultural rights. The audience reaction was immediate and visceral. Farmers nodding grimly, business owners shaking their heads in disgust. Even some Vintners Ridge residents looked embarrassed by their former HOA president's criminal behavior. County Supervisor Williams, who'd been privately encouraging our case for months, asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Mr. Brennan, what would prevent similar harassment campaigns against other agricultural operations?" Legal precedent, clear county policy, and criminal prosecution of anyone who thinks fake badges give them real authority. That's when Bobby Hutchins took the podium as our star witness, wearing a cheap suit that made him look like he was attending his own funeral. His voice shook like autumn leaves, but his testimony was rock solid. "Delilah Worthington paid me $500 for each enforcement visit," he said, pulling out his phone. "I've got text messages coordinating every fake citation every fraudulent complaint, every piece of this conspiracy. He read actual messages. Find anything actionable. Be creative with interpretations. I want documentation that will shut him down permanently. Then, Bobby played the audio recording that made the entire room lean forward. Delilah's voice saying, "I don't care what regulations you have to bend. Find something that destroys his operation permanently." The audience reaction was immediate and angry. Someone in the back shouted, "That's criminal conspiracy." Others started calling for her prosecution. Supervisor Williams had to use his gavel to restore order. Sheriff Morrison took the podium next, his presence commanding the kind of respect that comes with an actual badge, backed by actual authority. The sheriff's department has filed multiple felony charges against Delilah Worthington: attempted bribery of government officials, criminal harassment, property destruction, fraud, and conspiracy to corrupt official proceedings. He detailed the scope of her criminal enterprise: fake enforcement officers, fraudulent government complaints, systematic extortion of rural property owners, and attempted corruption of county inspectors. This isn't neighbor disputes. This is organized criminal activity targeting agricultural operations. But here came the moment that made 8 months of harassment worth every sleepless night. Delilah showed up. Against her attorney's desperate advice, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, she'd somehow convinced the court to let her address the hearing. The woman was apparently determined to finish destroying her life in the most public way possible. "I was protecting property values for 200 families," she declared, her voice echoing through the silent room like a confession at trial. Marcus Brennan's agricultural operation was threatening the investment security of an entire community. The hostile reception was immediate and overwhelming. Boos, catcalls, and enough angry voices that deputies moved closer to the podium. Several dozen people walked out in disgust, but I stayed to watch her complete her self-destruction on live television. Then came my mic drop moment. "My family has farmed this land for 3 generations, I said, standing at the podium while Delilah was escorted back to jail. "We've survived drought, frost, economic collapse, and plant diseases. But we've never faced anything as destructive as a bored HOA president with too much time and other people's money. Today's decision affects every rural property owner in this county. We're either a community that protects agricultural heritage, or we're a place where corporate-style harassment drives out family farmers. Whatever happens here tonight, this vineyard will keep producing wine, providing jobs, and preserving agricultural land for future generations." The thunderous applause lasted 3 minutes. Supervisor Williams called for the vote. Unanimous approval of the Agricultural Protection Ordinance, plus referral to the district attorney for review of all similar harassment complaints filed countywide in the past 5 years. 2 weeks after that county board meeting, everything fell into place like dominoes designed by Karma herself. The HOA settlement came through first, $85,000 covering my legal fees, lost business, emergency equipment costs, and a nice chunk for the stress they'd put me through. Delilah took a plea deal that was pure poetry: guilty to misdemeanor harassment, $5,000 in fines, 120 hours of community service picking up trash along county roads. There's something beautifully ironic about making her clean up other people's messes after spending months creating her own. Dave and Rita got their extorted money back too, plus interest calculated from the day they'd been forced to pay. The HOA's new leadership, decent people who actually read governing documents instead of treating them like suggestions, rewrote their rules to explicitly acknowledge agricultural easement protections. Amazing how reasonable people can solve problems when you remove the power-drunk narcissist from the equation. But here's what made everything worthwhile. I used that settlement money to create something bigger than revenge. Partnered with the county extension office to build the farm-to-table education center right here on the property. Now, we host high school students learning sustainable agriculture, run summer internships for kids who want to work the land, and operate year-round programs connecting urban students with rural heritage. Last month, 30 teenagers from San Francisco spent a week learning to prune vines, test soil, and understand where food actually comes from. One kid told me it was the first time he'd ever seen agriculture that wasn't in a documentary. Another asked if she could come back next summer to learn winemaking. That's the future right there. City kids discovering that farming isn't just something that happens to other people. The harassment taught me something unexpected about community strength. When word spread about Delilah's criminal campaign, neighbors I'd barely talked to showed up with equipment, volunteer labor, and moral support. Local vintners rallied around agricultural protection, like we were defending the Alamo. Even county supervisors, who usually move slower than geological formations, fast-tracked ordinances protecting rural property rights. As for Delilah, well, karma operates on its own schedule, but it's remarkably thorough. Her house went into foreclosure 3 months after the plea deal. Turns out when you're underwater on your mortgage and spending association funds on fake enforcement schemes, financial reality catches up faster than bad news. She moved to that Arizona rental permanently, though I heard through agricultural community gossip that she's trying to start a property management company there. God help those homeowners. Apparently some people never learn from their mistakes. The Vineyard's thriving beyond anything I could have imagined during those dark months of harassment. That 2019 vintage, the one we almost lost to sabotage, became our bestseller once the story got out. Funny how adversity can make grapes stronger, just like it makes farmers more determined. We've got a wine club with over 400 members now, most of them people who heard our story and wanted to support family farming against corporate-style intimidation. The tasting room hosts agricultural protection fundraisers twice a year, and we've become a destination for agritourism that actually educates people about farming instead of just selling them Instagram opportunities. The coalition we started now includes 63 rural property owners across Northern California, and we've prevented 4 other harassment campaigns before they escalated to legal warfare. Chen tells me she's handling 8 similar cases now, all using our precedent as legal foundation. 3 other states have adopted versions of our agricultural protection strategies. The title insurance company paid an undisclosed settlement to avoid class action lawsuits from 200 homeowners who'd been misled about agricultural restrictions. Last month, the county named the new Agricultural Protection Ordinance after me, the Marcus Brennan Agricultural Protection Act. Feels surreal seeing your name on legislation, but the important thing is protection for every family farmer who might face the next entitled HOA president with too much time and other people's money. Every morning, I walk through those vine rows with my coffee, listening to birds and watching mist roll through valleys that have been growing grapes since before suburbs existed. The security cameras are still there, but mostly they record wildlife and the occasional tourist taking photos. The irrigation system works perfectly, the soil's healthier than ever, and the next generation is learning that farming isn't just a job, it's stewardship of land and community. If you've got an HOA horror story that makes Delilah look reasonable, drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and some of your tales make my harassment look like gentle encouragement. And if you enjoyed watching a petty tyrant get exactly the justice she deserved, hit that subscribe button. I've got 3 more HOA revenge stories coming this month, and trust me, they're even crazier than this one. The land endures, family legacies endure, and sometimes, when you're really lucky, justice tastes as sweet as perfectly aged Cabernet Sauvignon.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.